welcome to another episode of Immigration and Mobility Decoded. I'm Eric, and joining me today, as always, is my co-host Finn. Finn, how are things going? We are almost at the end of September, and I have no idea where any time has gone.
I know we didn't have much of a summer here in Maine, as regular listeners of the podcast would know. If you listen to the episodes that we released this summer, it rained pretty much all season here. So we're in autumn now, and winter's coming up fast, but that is all right. Can't
That,
complain.
that's how it goes. That's how it goes. Very random question, Finn, and then we could hop into some important updates. But what's the fishing season out there in Maine? And only the reason I'm bringing this up is we were chatting beforehand. Is I've been watching a lot of content from a fisherman based in Maine. I think he's almost at like 700 or 800,000 subscribers on YouTube. It's so interesting. But one of the oddly satisfying videos is he'll catch lobsters and then he'll like scrape off the barnacles. I'm not too familiar with sea life, ocean life, or anything like that, but just scrapes off these barnacles, gives them a fish, and then just tosses them back in the water.
You sound like a real Midwesterner right now, Eric. Yeah, no, obviously in Maine, our claim to fame is cuisine-wise is lobster, and the lobstermen are the backbone of the Maine economy. At least that's what every politician who's ever run for any political office in Maine says.
Yeah.
But no, it's great. I'm not a huge lobster fan myself, just because if you're from here, you would never pay the amount that is charged at a restaurant for a lobster. But we do enjoy the benefits of the tourist economy of folks coming up here to eat our overpriced lobster. So if you're listening, keep coming up to Maine. Go to restaurants at Agunquit and Kennebunkport and Portland. Support the lobstermen. Support the restaurants.
Support Finn.
Yeah, not anymore. I used to work at those restaurants, but not these days. My successful career as a podcaster has supplemented my old restaurant work.
There we go. There we go. Yeah. So Finn, coming up in just a few minutes, I spoke with Brendan Coggan. We caught up, and we just chatted about some recent events, both on the he's part of Envoy Global, the SVP of Global Services there, and just catching us up with what's going on his side of things, and then also some other updates. So let me come up in a few moments, but Finn, just wanted to just quickly catch up with you on just immigration as a whole. As we said earlier, summer tends to be a little bit slower, and immigration, is no exception. There are a few updates here and there, a few things that the media was reporting on, but nothing too crazy. But one thing to kind of kick things off is we're a little over a year since the president signed the CHIPS Act, which was a big bipartisan bill to really bring back like semiconductor manufacturing to the U.S. There's a whole backstory to it where a lot of that has been, a lot of the semiconductors that are, the brains of our phones, our cars, our computers are manufactured in other countries. But the reason I'm bringing this up, Finn, is you came across a study from the Economic Innovation Group, or paper, and there are some concerns, and the EIG has some recommendations regarding the CHIPS Act and immigration. So what more can you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, since Congress passed the CHIPS and Science Act last summer, and since the Biden administration signed it into law, um, folks who follow labor and immigration policy have been sort of sounding the alarm that, hey, it's great that we're trying to reshore, this key manufacturing sector back in the U.S., but we don't have enough skilled labor to actually take on that initiative, right? So we have all this investment in the reshoring of chips manufacturing in the U.S., but we just don't have enough domestic talent to meet that investment. So the folks over at the Economic Innovation Group, and I'll give them a shout out, Adam Ozemek. We're gonna have to cut this out. Adam Ozemek and Connor O'Brien.
Wait, actually, just start over from. I want to give them a shout out, and then
yeah. Good call. I want to give them a shout out. Adam Ozemek and Connor O'Brien, researchers, like you said, Eric, at the Economic Innovation Group, released a policy proposal essentially imploring Congress to create a chipmaker's visa So a special visa with an expedited pathway to green card sponsorship for folks, for high skilled immigrants who have a specific set of skills that can be utilized in this reshoring effort to bring chip manufacturing back to America, so that again we actually have the labor to meet the needs required to actually bring chip manufacturing back to our shores. So it's an interesting paper. We'll link it in the description below in the podcast, so everyone can take a look. I definitely recommend it. And then the other thing that was in the news, Eric, and you were on the ball last week. I know you came out with a video with Ian Love on this. Is the potential government shutdown that is looming this week. We're recording this on September 27th, and in the next couple of days here, it's very likely that the government could shut down if Congress doesn't come to some sort of a deal. What did you learn from your conversation with Ian Love, an attorney at CIP, about what the implications of government shutdown would mean for immigration?
Yeah, no, yeah, I think it's I would say first off, the odds of the government shutdown happening are probably 98% at this time. They just have kept going up throughout the month of September. Won't get into any of the political side of why there's going to be a shutdown. But Finn, to address your question, and we'll definitely link the video I did with Ian below and throughout and at the end of this podcast episode. Um, there are definitely going to be potential effects on immigration, and we can look at some prior shutdowns to see what those effects would be. But off the bat, USCIS would largely be unimpacted by a potential shutdown, and this is because it is a fee-funded agency. However, other aspects would be impacted, particularly the Department of Labor, Department of State, I think the border, CBP, ICE, etc. One thing Ian mentioned is if there is a shutdown, the Department of Labor will suspend operations, and so they, therefore, will not be able to process LCAs or labor condition applications, which means employers, may not be able to could not file H-1B, H-1B1, and E3 petitions. So there would also be a pause in the processing of ETA 9089 applications at the DOL, which would then lead to green card process delays. So there are a handful of effects that could happen, that may happen as a result of a shutdown. Definitely recommend everyone watch the video to see what these impacts may be. And then Finn, to your point, we're just kind of gonna wait and see what happens. If there is a shutdown, it will be the depending on where you are, but starting October 1st, midnight Eastern. It's like one of those things where if they don't have a deal signed by like 11:59 p.m. Eastern, then at the stroke of midnight, the government shuts down on October 1st, the morning of October 1st, I guess I should say, because that's just how our government operates.
Yeah, October 1st is often a very important date in the immigration world as well, especially the high skilled immigration
Yeah.
world, because it's the start of the new fiscal year for the government, right? And that's what's preempting this whole potential government shutdown as well.
Yep.
They do things a little weird, obviously, in the
Yeah.
federal government in terms of their fiscal year versus calendar year. But
Yeah.
one thing that was really disappointing in the last couple of weeks for a lot of folks was the lack of movement in the October visa bulletin, which oftentimes is a visa bulletin that has some optimism surrounding it, just because it is the start of a new fiscal year, and sometimes folks who are stuck in that growing backlog hope that there'll be some progression. Unfortunately, there wasn't much movement at all in some of those key categories, EB2 and EB3 for Indian Chinese nationals, and as a result, another article that I was reading this week that I wanted to shout out from Fiona Harrigan at Reason magazine. America's continuing to see immigrant brain drain because of the stagnation in our immigration policies, and a lot of our would-be high-skilled immigrants here, a lot of our foreign graduates from U.S. universities are heading to places like Canada. Fiona in her article references an Niskanen Center study where they found that in about a 4-year period, The U.S. lost tens of thousands of foreign graduates from U.S. universities who ended up moving to Canada and taking jobs there because they couldn't secure a visa here. She also cited a couple of stats from Envoy's 2023 Immigration Trends Report, where we were able to show that companies are really increasingly considering looking abroad to place foreign talent rather than placing it here because of a lot of the immigration barriers and the stagnation here as well. And I know that's something you're about to talk about with Brendan in the conversation we're going to share with the audience. But all isn't green on the Canadian immigration front these days as well. There's a bit of a geopolitical tiff going on between India and Canada that is now incorporating some visa restrictions between the two countries, and that's something you talk about with Brendan, right, Eric?
Yes, yes. Again, we won't get into the geopolitical side of things. Like there are a lot of third-party sources out there from NPR, New York Times, Wall Street Journal that everyone could go look to kind of learn a little bit more about why this is happening. But yeah, Brendan talks a little bit more about that, what it means, and just how any listeners can potentially navigate these these situations, these unexpected situations, and just kind of offer some general thoughts there. So I definitely tune into that conversation, and we'll link an article from the New York Times that kind of explains a little bit of the backstory of this diplomatic escalation that's been happening for over a week now between India and China. So yeah, I think Finn, with that, let's hop into the conversation with Brendan Coggan, the SVP of Global Services at Envoy Global. And now I'm joined by Brendan Coggan, the SVP of Global Services here at Envoy Global. Brendan, thank you so much for joining today's episode of Immigration and Mobility Decoded.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Appreciate you having me. Good to see you again. Good to chat with you. I was excited to get the call up. So really, yeah. I mean, so much going on right now. Really excited just to catch up and talk to you a little bit.
Yeah, excited to have you back on. I think as we mentioned in the last episode, you are officially, in the bullpen of guests. So, just look over, tap the arm, bring out, what are you, are righty or lefty?
I'm a lefty, which I'm told means
you are a lefty.
Yeah. Which I'm told left-footed as well. Actually, everything I do is left for some reason. So a little bit strange in that regard. But yep.
Nice. Also, well, yeah, Brendan, as you mentioned, there is definitely a lot to catch up on, from events and news to some other seasonal things that we'll tease our audience with a little bit. But spoiler alert, it involves a brown ball. So Brendan, as you mentioned, you've been traveling a lot of events going on in the summer. You were just up north in Canada, Vancouver, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. First time to Vancouver. So I was looking forward to it for a long time, but really even more so about going to the city. The first time we've all kind of gotten together as a wider team for our practice, our growing Canadian practice, which has been sort of slammed and a point of emphasis for us with everything that a lot of U.S. organizations and multinational organizations are looking for in terms of places where they're growing and expanding. Really a great opportunity to get out there sort of more in full force with members of the team and kind of learn more about just how everything is growing organically on the ground in Canada, as opposed to sort of on this more international, multinational type of circumstance. So, one, was really excited to see the city, but more so to get everybody on our end together and to really get into the industry in a way that get into the industry and then the the local circles there in a way that we hadn't in the past. So it was a great event, and also just a really good chance to sit, listen, learn, and also give people a little bit of insight into what we do and how we help companies that we work with.
Definitely. How big has the Envoy Global Canadian team grown to now?
Yeah, so it's funny because I love to tell this sort of story over and over again because I think it's just that impressive. Just as kind of close as 2 years ago, maybe going on 3 years ago, there was one. I'm going to shout him out, and he's going to blush. There was one person on our team in Canada. His name's Jim Yang, fantastic practitioner out of the Toronto area, and he was really holding down the fort for a really important jurisdiction for us and for our clients. And then over time, since then, Jim and other members of the team there have kind of grown steadily, adding other practitioners and paralegals. This fantastic team that I had, the ability to really spend time with and get a sense of the culture that's been developed there too, which has been amazing. But but Jim, starting from just one person 3 years ago now, up to a team that's close to 10. Right. And so, really, if you are a percentage person, that 1,000% increase is like something we like to shout out, but also just this kind of deeper organic understanding of the the ways that we can practice immigration within Canada and the import of immigration in Canada for companies all over the world, and really making sure that we're sort of growing and building and facilitating that, which, in the reverse order is a testament to just how much we've been growing, right? Our clients and their demands for help with Canadian immigration has been something that we've seen and needed to facilitate really over the course of those years, and that's what you see it translate to. So I always go back to Jim and I say, hey man, I know it's busy, but remember just being you and having all these things happen. It's really great to see the way that all of that has grown, and Jim's amazing, other members of the team, other practitioners, everybody is really trying to bring something new, I think, to the marketplace and to the way immigration is handled in Canada by virtue of this kind of entrepreneurial spirit. And what that's translated to is, frankly, been really one of my favorite things that I've seen over the course of the work in the last few years.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, so I guess I do have one up on you in that I have known Jim longer than you because I do remember those early days when it was just Jim.
Yeah.
And whenever we did have something relating to Canadian immigration, whether it was a webinar or a blog post, we turn to Jim, be like, "Hey Jim, how's this look?" So Jim, if you're listening, huge shout out to you. Hope you're still got that good old Switch on you, because I know he's a big Nintendo Switch guy.
Yep. That's it. Yeah, Jim predates me, just like you, Eric. So I know that the it's just kind of the other part of it is just with the type of sort of work that we do and the manner in which we try to bring to the marketplace overall, which is could be considered a little bit different. Yep. That kind of institutional knowledge, as we've gone through that growth and seen that growth, one is obviously particularly encouraging because we're doing things that way, and it's translated to the team as it stands now and what's coming in the future. But then also to making sure that we do stick with our cultural ideals and the way that we know that we want to work and the way that we want to work with our colleagues. So
yeah, definitely. So Brendan, back to the event you and the team were just at. You mentioned everyone. It was a lot of good informational sessions. What were some maybe 5 quick hitters of things you and the team learned?
Yeah, I think there's kind of aspects on this both on the immigration front, right, as a whole, but then also just what do we know about how how we want to practice just in general. So takeaways that you hear from practitioners in Canada and some of the common threads that you get across region by region, and you go, wow, we've just heard about this this kind of initiative by certain employers in certain industries in attending a conference in Singapore and working with folks in LATAM, and now it's percolating here in Canada. So that's kind of one of those big benefits that I think our teams see in being in a lot of these industry events, is just connecting a lot of dots, right? That you're pulling out of different regions, and then realizing and trying to take away, really synthesizing it and taking away, how can we be proactive in understanding that this is sort of bubbling up for similarly situated organizations, and bringing that information from a benchmarking perspective and a strategy perspective, bringing that all to the clients that we work with every day, so that we can be kind of making sure that their programs are a step ahead. A few of the more specific things that were of particular import, one of which we actually had the pleasure of sort of moderating and handling in a panel about, was just this idea, again, common words, the idea of remote work, the idea of nomadic work visas. How are all of these things sort of being contemplated in the Canadian space, and then just really globally? What are we seeing in terms of trends? And so we had a great panel made up of a few amazing people, centered around just this topic, right? And with somebody that we know quite well named Chow, who is who works in the mobility side at one of the corporations that we work with, to folks on the practitioner side, a really awesome individual named Rahman, and then also to the remote work setup side of things for the companies that kind of pair with employers, Ilya. We actually managed to have a conversation that started with a very clear plan of what we wanted to go through and go down, a lot of audience engagement, and making it more of a conversation. And it almost worked too well. We got through essentially the first section, going through, and then gave the audience a prompt. And that prompt was so, for lack of better words, sort of inspiring or polarizing that we kind of just carried that conversation all the way through. But really, what it showed, in the fact that the audience was so engaged and wanting to talk about this on such a sort of more a deeper level, this idea of what should companies do, no matter sort of the countries that they're engaged in or the industry type. What are companies overall doing to accommodate this idea of remote work without losing something that makes that company special, right? Without losing the connectivity that certain teams have with each other because they're all in the same time zone, or without losing what comes with the ability to tap somebody on the shoulder and get an easy answer within the office. What are sort of some of the drivers and the philosophies about remote work and the nomadic work visa? And really, it's really it came down to this idea of every company is different, obviously, and what you prioritize as you think about this concept then is also inherently quite different. Some companies are focused exclusively on just potential tax implications. Hey, we don't want to deal with it, or we'll only deal with it to this extent in a certain place. Others are more concerned about culture, right? And making sure that people have access to each other and project teams can work together. And others are, driven by, if we can do this compliantly, then great. But if I don't feel comfortable from a compliance standpoint in maintaining the knowledge of where my population is, and that everybody is kind of representing the company in one way or another in a way that we appreciate, whether it's the government oversight part or just the kind of external marketing aspect of things that comes with it, that's how we're going to make our decision. So we were able to see, and I think in a productive way, how a lot of different organizations think, and how that then translates to the policies that they may or may not implement, depending on whether they want to leverage this kind of program in the first place. But I'll tell you, Eric, I was coming in and I go, we're so prepared. We've got all of these different sections and these different prompts. The audience is going to be really excited, and they were. But the first part of that conversation ended up taking up the whole slot, which, in all honesty, I thought was actually pretty fantastic. It meant everybody was really into the conversation and had a lot to share.
Definitely. Anytime you can get that audience engagement, it just helps make that presentation that much more better. But I feel like that's how these always goes. You have that plan, and then unexpectedly, it just kind of goes sideways a little bit, but in this time it's a good way. Um, Quick follow up, Brendan. So I remember the last time we talked, and even towards the end of last year, obviously the remote visas. What's your sense on of just like how still are companies approaching this? So I feel like at the start of this year and even Q1, we're seeing um not bad economic news, but there was just these, I'll call them vibes, right? Bad vibes. Everyone's saying things are going to get bad, things are going to get bad. Companies are requiring their workers to come into the office more and more. But now here we are in September, and I'm reading a CNBC article about RTO plans, reversing even on those. Remote visas, huge topic in the conference you just at. So what is your sense of just how our companies viewing remote visas and just the longevity, and where do they stand in relation to maybe some of the other work visas or permits that you and your team help facilitate?
Yeah, I think it's you're kind of even just hitting the nail on the head with how that question, how you were posing that question, Eric. I think the idea is this: we're seeing sort of a separation of aspects of this thing that we've kind of grouped all together in the first instance when we say, oh, remote work is here to stay. Every company needs to let their workers work remotely, and it's just gonna be that way. Um, Now it's kind of breaking into different sort of considerations and facets amongst organizations that at least we see in the space. And what I mean by that is, on one end of the spectrum, there is a little bit of a pendulum swing towards asking folks to come back to the office, at least in a hybrid way, right? 2-3 days a week, all the way up to 5 days a week, and that's becoming something that has been a little bit more popular amongst a number of employers over the course of especially last 6, 8, 9 months. At the same time, though, those same companies, in our experience, will also be some of the first to tell you that we do need a remote work policy, and we want to maybe instill some kinds of programs, whether they're rotational in nature or what we call it in the space of working holiday type situation, where folks get to get out there according to certain parameters within a policy and then come back and offer those kind of programs. So you kind of have both, right? It's a well understood and I think well shared principle that remote work and that concept is here to stay. Governments are acting in turn, right? They're creating new visas to allow for specifically that, and more are either releasing them now or planning to as time goes on. So that trend is certainly there, but there's also this aspect of, but in the meantime, also, if you're not part of this remote work program, or you're not doing this in the way that our policy allows, the domestic remote work aspect of things is a little bit different, right? That companies are skewing towards asking their employees to be back at least for a certain amount of time. Back to the conference in that session, one of the things that was striking was, as everybody was kind of having their own sort of takes, industry to industry and contact to contact, about just the efficacy of remote work and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing or anything. Anytime that somebody sort of brought everybody back and said, essentially, but we do know that remote work is here to stay, right? In some capacity, that didn't garner too much pushback as a concept. I think people are relatively realistic that this as a concept is here to stay, and that there will continue to be built out and more fleshed out, mechanisms for handling it and for offering it. But at the same time, then, you still see these policies coming through on a regular basis of just, okay, time for enough of the remote work thing. If you're within this sort of this radius of our office, you got to come in a couple of weeks. So I think it's fair now to say that it's going a little bit in both directions. And it's just a matter of getting into sub concepts with the idea of remote work rather than just, calling it all one thing.
Right. All the more reason for any listeners out there, potential viewers, to reach out to you, Brendan, and your team to get
Yeah.
those plans into place, and see where they want to take their mobility programs in 2024.
Yeah, I think that's one of the kind of most interesting things that we've kind of been able to help with, as everything's kind of been in its infancy. Frankly, with a lot of these concepts, is understanding what all of these different potential drivers for the decision making and creating a policy are company to company, and then narrowing those down, finding out what's really important to each organization, and then helping shape and create these policies so that they have something to really point to and tell the employees they got to follow, and just get their arms around something that, again, remote work is here to stay. How do we make sure that we're adapting and evolving to make it valuable for us and for our employees?
Yeah. Brendan, final question regarding the conference you were just at, then I want to jump across the Pacific. What did the recent news or program that the Canadian government put into place that would attract H-1B visa holders? Did that program come up at all? I remember actually speaking to Jim. We created a video with Jim and Daphne, and they provided an update on that program, and I believe the allotment of like 10,000 slots like filled up in a matter of hours. Um, Any updates on that, or just when talking with attendees, how are they viewing this program?
Yeah, I think the idea there's sort of two concepts that are associated with this. The first is from a very wide overarching perspective, Canada's done a lot of really savvy things to attract the type of talent that the country is looking for just by virtue of immigration rule changes, right? And that goes back a number of years now. Like it flies by, but it went back a number of years now to introducing the global talent streams for things and getting and streamlining for certain types of applicants at a certain level, processing times and document requirements and all of these kind of things that make Canada more attractive to the types of applicants that they're really looking for, and kind of those rules and those regulations being implemented at a time that the U.S. was becoming less and less attractive from an immigration perspective, just because of more challenging immigration regulations, right? And the way that the type of interpretations and the discretion being used for getting people into the U.S. And so, kind of as a very savvy move towards saying, well, a lot of folks are going to feel like they can't get to the U.S., but those industries are just as important to us in Canada, right? And seeing which ways they can sort of leverage all of those situations. And so this obviously is almost a more transparent version of that, and saying, yeah, we're happy to let the U.S. folks vet you. We're happy to let them get you into the country, but now, instead of having to work for just my employer that sponsored me, or rather than being subject to a lot more of the sort of parameters that come with the H-1B visa status, now you have this opportunity to go to Canada, work for any employer, and have a little bit of a looser manner of handling immigration. And so, on one end, that's really a continuation of something that we've seen over the course of the years. The other one is back again to this idea of nomadic work visas and remote work visas, right? Again, an open work permit really means that you have the opportunity to work for whoever you might want to in Canada, which inherently means maybe potentially wherever you might want to in Canada, and kind of go along those lines. But also a precursor to what we know now is coming down the pipe in Canada, and an actual digital work permit, right? An actual digital means of conducting remote work. So Canada sort of making clear by virtue of a few of these regulations that, hey, we're open and willing to exploring this idea of allowing remote workers from elsewhere to come on through and bring their talent and bring their potentially their industries over the course of time to the country. And it definitely was a hot topic, Eric. And I think, kind of this idea of what Canada is, again, showing itself to be willing to do to attract the kind of talent in juxtaposition to other jurisdictions. It's a next step there. It's a next step.
Got it. No, that's a solid recap. So yeah, Brendan, hopping over the Pacific, similarly, the APAC team at Envoy Global has grown quite a bit in the last few years. And there's also, I believe, an event in Singapore, was it, over the summer?
Yeah, that's right. Kind of coincided exactly with the conference experience for the Canadian team in Vancouver. Another similar event, really regionally oriented, more so than just being for a specific country. But we were so excited to kind of be able to say that right now, as of these 2 or 3 days, as we're all attending these conferences all over the world, and kind of trying to bring our services, out and into the mainstream, I guess, or into something along those lines. Having this multiple presence all across the world was really cool for me to see, cool for the business to see, and really just, again, was a reinforcement of the growth that we've undertaken on a global presence. And we're obviously continuing in that trajectory, and lucky enough to be continuing in that trajectory. But at the same time, sometimes you don't always see the tangible thing happening. And that was one of those experiences. We were competing, sharing team pictures at different venues, going back and forth across the jurisdictions, and everybody was just so kind of excited and happy to put out their expertise and put out their knowledge and meet other folks in the industry that we can all be basically passing benchmarking information and chatting about the industry with, and getting all these different perspectives and then bringing them back with us. Right.
Yeah, no, love to hear. Love to hear. What other events do you have coming up? Either in the next few weeks or before the end of the year.
Yeah, no, the fall traditionally busy in
Yeah.
the conferences. I think probably the main one to highlight is what's coming up for GWS, formerly ERC. I'm still working on the on all the acronyms, but coming up in Boston, which really has obviously, like everything else, we all had to take a break over COVID, right? As this big industry event would come together, and really one of the only opportunities in such a worldwide space for people to be in the same place in mass and really make those connections and share information and get all that done. We had to take a break over COVID. It came back after COVID, but this really, we're getting a sense now that this really seems to be, all the way back in full swing. Folks flying from, every corner of the globe, and from every kind of industry that touches mobility, frankly, to get together and kind of learn from each other and have the opportunity to all just be together and put faces to names and humanize the situation a little bit as people are in the same vicinity. So, that's probably the big one to call out. Mid-October, coming up in Boston, a place that I have not been back to in a very long time, but did do undergrad there. So I'm sure it's going to be exactly the same as 15 years ago. But Boston in the fall is something to behold. So I think that it's going to be a really great conference. I'm excited about just who all seems to be attending and the size of it. And I know that we're sending a pretty good contingency to get together with everybody. So for those of you in the audience that are going to be there, looking forward to seeing you.
Yeah, definitely. You did undergrad at where again?
I would be very surprised if you were able to pull it.
I feel like you told me, and I know it's a smaller school.
Yeah. It was Tufts University right there in Medford and Somerville, right there on the border. One of the best experiences of my life, frankly, and a good opportunity to actually learn that I didn't want to deal with the winter as an adult, so I made my way back to San Francisco just after college. But the energy and and just sort of the beauty of Boston as a place, especially with all of those schools, especially during the school year. It's kind of unmatched, I think, in just being unique and, just full of life. So excited that we all get to be there in come October. I think it's going to be actually a really good one now that things feel like they're back in full swing.
Definitely. So, yeah, if anyone's listening and you want to chat with Brendan, learn more about Envoy Global and the global services that his team provides, Envoy will have a booth there. So definitely feel free to stop by and chat with Brendan and other members of the team. And I'm sure there's going to be plenty of events, probably with some Sam Adams. So that sounds. You'll have to have one for me while you're there, Brendan.
Yeah. The Sam Adams is a good callback.
Yeah, definitely. Brendan, wanted to shift gears a little bit and spend just a few minutes on some recent news going back to Canada. We won't dive into all of the backstory with it, but there are some diplomatic tensions between Canada and India that were unveiled by the Prime Minister of Canada last week, and it's kind of led to a tit for tat type situation. Culminating with the end of last week, India suspended visa services. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, that's right, and it's a pretty widespread suspension, which of course carries a lot of impact for a lot of folks, where travel in and out of India in particular, and especially to places like Canada and the U.S. is really a common thing, right? It's something that people rely on, and so we've seen this before. Certain kind of similar geopolitical tension issues taking their way or making their impact on just immigration in general, and that being one of the levers that are pulled to kind of say, hey, this is how we're engaging right now as countries. The specifics really, it's if you are somebody looking to travel to India from Canada as as somebody living in the country, or really holding citizenship. The ability to acquire a visa for that travel is not currently possible. We're kind of all hands on deck and keeping an eye out on the news to see how that actually will be interpreted going forward. What we can expect in terms of the length of a suspension, or whether that results in different requirements for visas after a suspension is lifted. All of those kind of things that, kind of right now are not really that fully well known, and will take a little bit of confirmation from sources within the government and things along those lines, but something we're watching really closely. And I will say one of the things that's particularly sort of interesting about the situation, especially with the visas themselves, is that for a very long time, India, especially for business travel and tourism, India's had a provision for electronic visas. So not having to go through the whole consular process and get an appointment and, have everything processed and all the paperwork that, physical paperwork that comes with it. They rolled out basically the ETV, the electronic visa capacity for nationals of more and more countries over time. And for a long time, Canada wasn't on that list. Canada had to Canadian citizens had to continue to go through the regular consular process for getting a visa stamp in their passport until relatively recently, got onto the electronic visa list. And now, we're kind of at this stage where it's a suspension after that kind of progress, really, in streamlining things for folks coming from Canada, requiring those visas. So, again, we have to continue to watch it. I think in the past we have seen certain different tensions rising between given countries, and that playing out in terms of the ability to secure a visa, or how hard you were scrutinized at the time of entry despite having a visa, what you can do in terms of extending your stay while you're in that destination, that some of those circumstances have changed. All of that at play here. It does tend over time to sort of evolve and result in some kind of changes, regulatory wise. But overall, they always do require a little bit of a wait and see this early, to see, what is going to be the prudent approach for folks that just need to go in and out of the country.
So, Brendan, immigration is one of those things that is impacted by politics and geopolitics. We've seen it here in the States. The last administration, and even now with some regards. When situations like this arise, and you're working with clients who are trying to move people around as part of broader business goals, what's just your general pointers of like how to navigate situations like this?
Yeah, it's a little bit twofold. So, in the first instance, if we were looking at something like what we're looking at today, where it's so new, and that I think that there's still a lot being obviously sorted out between the relevant government authorities, right? In those instances where there isn't actually a pathway to secure a visa, but maybe you hold a visa already, maybe you're in country already, all these kind of things, we take a look, right, and say, what are your circumstances? How do they play into this? Really, the language and the enforcement of the suspension at hand, and give guidance essentially on a category by category type of individual, really with an eye towards making sure that you technically know what is possible and what isn't possible, so that you have that baseline knowledge, and then you take it a step further, right? And the step further is really, even if you could go, is this a good time to go? Will this be a good experience for somebody to travel and go through what I think you can assume is going to be a more highly scrutinized process at the time of arrival, or if you're ever asked to present your immigration paperwork anywhere else while you're on the ground. What are some of these factors that you have to now weigh into your cost benefit analysis and your employee experience analysis and all of these different, added factors? and do some of those new things outweigh the business need or the personal need to make that trip? We saw something similar actually with Canada and the U.S., frankly, and China a few years ago, where there were some geopolitical, business-oriented things going on, and the countries, the tensions rose between a few of the countries, and some of the guidance really got pretty specific and granular for folks, especially if you could already travel, or if you were seeking a visa at that time. You do have to get into some of the things that maybe are immigration adjacent, with respect to saying, yes, it's a fine idea for you to travel, us giving that as your immigration counsel, or there's a few things that you have to watch out for, or here are the risks. We really wouldn't recommend it, but the business, ultimately, you guys make the call, right? Based on our line out of all of the considerations. And a lot of, every business is different, right? We really need to get this done. The employee is risk averse. They understand some of the things that are coming up. So we're going forward. Or, hey, listen, we can put this on a pause for 3 months. We know it's going to hurt a little bit, but it wouldn't hurt as bad as, having somebody get detained or stuck, or, whatever it might be. So the guidance really does just depend on the circumstances and what the as of today is with all of that kind of news. And that's, the sort of the other part is making sure that you fully know hour by hour what the actual temperature is.
Right, definitely. And I think with that, definitely for viewers and listeners, check out envoyglobal.com for relevant updates. I believe we published an update last week when this news broke, so stay tuned for more details on that, as well as check out the respective government websites and for more information. Brendan, final news related question. And then we'll end things. I noticed the shadow behind me starting to move a little bit, so I know that's when it's.
Well, I think
the sun is shifting.
I think I'm getting some of the shifting sun as well here.
Yeah. I'm actually curious. I don't actually know if it will, but impact the global side of things. But for those who are listening unaware, the U.S. government will, I would say, very likely will have a government shutdown on October 1st. Mainly it'll affect things on the U.S. immigration side, Department of Labor, Department of State. USCIS should still operate as normal since they are a fee-funded agency. But Brendan, from a global perspective, mobility perspective, will a U.S. government shutdown have an effect on companies in any way you might imagine?
The short answer is not enough to really, kind of go too deep into it. You're right on the USCIS front, and then as probably a lot of people here know, the name of the game when it comes to immigration just globally is reciprocity, right? So if we are essentially still operating in a similar capacity, and especially operating, even if we weren't, not in a capacity that is meant to retaliate or to make any statements internationally, it's really a function of the budget, right, here in the U.S. Where none of that is really at play, then we don't worry too much on the opposite side of things in terms of things being more challenging or more difficult in any given jurisdiction. The points of consideration really then become, is any of the budget or shutdown, does any of that relate to sort of some of the things that are happening on the ground in other countries where the U.S. government is involved? And that government involvement being the original basis for some of these visa categories that people go ahead and take forward, right? So if you are maybe working on a government contract as an organization, or if you do have employees that are traveling by virtue of some kind of work being done with the military or something along those lines, then possibly a little bit of a consideration, though, in practice, those tend to be even higher priority as making things happen. So short answer, no, we're not sort of hunkering down or getting ready or preparing necessarily for anything that is going to be so much different if there is a government shutdown on the global immigration side. But the world is a complicated place too, so hence a couple of the caveats there, especially where the U.S. government and money that the government uses is involved.
Yeah, definitely. On our channel, we do have a video with an attorney at Corporate Immigration Partners, explaining some, potentially what might happen if there is a shutdown. We will link that or put it up on the screen when this video is nearing its end. But as always, like to say, definitely consult with with your immigration counsel for further information regarding that. Well, Brendan, it's been awesome chatting with you. I think before we hop off, though, I just need to see where you are when it comes to your 49ers. Last time you were on, it was the Giants. So that's hard to believe, but that was back in May, right when the MLB season started. And so now we're officially in fall. Your 49ers are 3-0. They're looking like the best team, although the Dolphins might challenge you on that front. But 49ers, I must say, looking pretty good. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be hard for me to say that I'm anything but extremely optimistic at this point, which is always the most dangerous way to be, right? Following a sports team. So,
Yeah.
listen, between what we kind of went through in the NFC Championship a little bit recently, going through 3 quarterbacks in the over the course of the game, 3 quarterbacks and a running back who came in to play quarterback by the way. It's great. It's great to see the bounce back this year. So feeling good. I know I don't want to touch any sore spots, Eric, but we are a very we're a very heavy San Francisco and very heavy Chicago based elements of our firm.
Yeah.
So at least some of us are feeling very excited about the season so far.
Yeah, being a Bears fan has been rough for the last year. Well, at least for sure the last year and a half. I think they're coming up on 1 year since their last win. So it's definitely been a long time. But Brendan, I will say, things are going good for your team and as a fan base when right before the season starts, the organization trades a former first round pick number 2, and there's like no discourse, nothing. It's just because you guys got the Mr. Irrelevant, and
yeah.
That
Listen, the Brock Purdy story is ripe already for a 30 for 30 in my mind on ESPN. But I will be perpetually knocking on wood now that I've kind of been so bullish on so bullish on this so far. And I will also say that we still haven't quite reached the pinnacle of the season yet, because I don't know for the audience and for you, Eric, if you caught this one, but Taylor Swift is not showing up at our games yet. So we gotta figure something out there, and to really cross that.
Yeah. That actually, it was earlier today. I was reading Taylor or Swift Mania, whatever it's called these days. Definitely took over the NFL yesterday, and a lot of columns were about it. And of course, the Bears were on the receiving end of a lot of jokes, and it's just been rough as for us this year. So we'll see where things go, but I think 49ers definitely looking good. So yeah, enjoy the ride.
Yeah, that's the key, is enjoying the ride, because I have been right there with you for a number of seasons too, Eric, and I get it. So hang in there, man. We'll see. It's a long season. We'll see what happens, but that's for many of us, that's the must watch of the weekend. Is just everybody's looking forward to football Sunday. Yep.
Definitely. Well, Brendan, it's been a pleasure chatting with you today. Appreciate you hopping on, sharing some insights from the various conferences that you and the team have been attending over the summer. Summer is always crazy months with vacations and things of that sort. So it's great to just, hear your stories of the teams getting together, whether it's in Singapore or up in Vancouver, and, sharing those insights. So I appreciate the time, and we'll chat soon.
Yeah, no, likewise, Eric. Thanks for having me, and also you're always so great to talk to, man. So appreciate you having me on, and thanks to everybody in the audience for putting up with some football talk there at the end of it.
That's why we saved it for the end.
Yeah, good call.